Have you ever looked at the grand, silent face of a mountain range and felt a sense of ancient order, a design too profound for mere chance? What if the giants of our oldest myths were never beings of flesh and blood, striding across the land? What if they were the land itself? Consider the possibility that long before the first spark of life ignited in the primordial seas, our planet possessed a consciousness, a slow, geological mind, a sentience not of neurons and electricity, but of stone, magma, and time. This is the quiet question we explore tonight, that the most majestic and puzzling features of our world, from the impossible geometry of abyssal trenches to the rhythmic poetry of volcanic islands, are not scars of chaos, but the weathered monuments of a mind whose thoughts were continents and whose lifespan is measured in eons. This journey into the deep past, into the very memory of the rock beneath our feet, is a path of quiet contemplation. It asks us to look at the familiar world and see the ghost of something unimaginably vast. If you find yourself drawn to these speculative whispers, to the mysteries that lie dormant in the heart of geology and myth, consider joining us on this exploration. Subscribing is a quiet way to ensure you don't miss the next chapter in our search for the forgotten stories of the cosmos. Our exploration is not about finding final answers, but about learning to appreciate the profound beauty of the questions themselves. Questions that reframe our place in a universe far stranger and more magnificent than we ever imagined. The story of our world is still being told, and its earliest verses are waiting to be heard. Before this silent awakening, the story of Earth was one of glorious, untamed violence. It was a world governed solely by the unthinking laws of physics and chemistry. Imagine a young planet, a sphere of roiling magma oceans under a bruised, toxic sky, perpetually bombarded by the debris of a forming solar system. The sun was a dimmer, weaker star, casting a perpetual twilight over a landscape of pure, brutalist geology. Volcanoes erupted not in a chain or pattern, but as random, furious outbursts, spewing molten rock that hardened into jagged, meaningless shapes. The first continents were not solid land masses, but ephemeral rafts of cooling crust, drifting and colliding on a sea of fire with a mindless, destructive fury. There was no order, no intention, no pattern, only the blind, reactive processes of a planet settling into its violent birth. Then, over a span of time so vast it defies human comprehension, a change began. It was a shift too slow for any observer, a transformation detectable only in the deep record of the rocks. In the nascent oceans of the southern hemisphere, a chain of volcanoes began to emerge from the seafloor, not randomly, but with a mathematical precision that defied all probability. On a forming supercontinent, a great rift valley started to tear the land apart, not in a jagged, chaotic scar, but in a perfect, sweeping arc, as if carved by a compass of impossible scale. Mountain ranges rose not in a chaotic crumble of stone, but with a strange, terraced symmetry, their peaks ascending in deliberate, rhythmic steps. This was not chaos. This was the emergence of order from noise, the first hint of a silent, deliberate intent shaping the very body of the planet. This was the awakening of the geological mind. The giants did not walk upon the land. They were the land, and they had begun to sculpt their own form. Their thoughts were not fleeting electrical impulses, but slow, grinding tectonic pressures that pushed continents together and pulled them apart over millions of years. Their language was not spoken in sound waves, but written in the slow subduction of oceanic plates and the deliberate uplift of granite batholiths. Their civilization was not composed of cities and tools, but of entire landscapes, each feature a word, a phrase, a stanza, in a planetary poem. The Earth was no longer a passive ball of rock reacting to cosmic forces. It had become an artist, using the raw materials of its own being to express a consciousness of unimaginable patience and scale. But the very forces these giants once commanded became the agents of their own erasure. The slow, patient breath of time which they mastered eventually turned against their creations. Eons are the ultimate eraser. The wind and the rain, acting over hundreds of millions of years, soften the sharp, deliberate edges of their mountain-sized sculptures, rounding them into the familiar, natural forms we see today. Entire continents, bearing their most profound works of geological art, were dragged back into the mantle, their messages melted into silence. The planet's own lifeblood, its molten core and shifting crust, became a form of slow-moving amnesia, consuming the evidence of its own ancient consciousness. What was once a clear language of form has now become a faint, geological whisper, a subtle pattern easily mistaken for the random noise of nature. In the quiet halls of modern geology, we have built a grand and logical narrative for our world. It is a story told in the language of plate tectonics, of subduction zones, and continental drift. We speak of erosion as the patient sculptor, of volcanism as the planet's fiery creative impulse. These are the accepted laws, the powerful and elegant models that explain the vast majority of Earth's features. They tell us how mountains rise in the slow, crumpling collision of continents, and how oceans are born in the spreading of the seafloor. This framework is our map of deep time, a rational guide through the billions of years of the planet's chaotic, impersonal history. It is a story of magnificent forces, operating without mind or intention, a symphony of physics and chemistry playing out on a planetary scale. It is the story we tell ourselves, and for the most part, it is a story that holds true. The Earth keeps its own diary, written in the patient accumulation of stone. Geologists are its careful readers, learning to decipher the language of strata, the grammar of faults and folds. Each layer of rock is a page, each fossil a word, telling of ancient seas, of vanished forests, and of climates long past. We can see the evidence of great ice ages that scoured the land, and the faint chemical signatures of the planet's first, struggling breath. This geological record is our most profound connection to the deep past, a testament to a world governed by cause and effect. It tells a story of a planet acting and reacting, a passive stage upon which the dramas of chemistry and, much later, biology have unfolded. It is a history of magnificent accidents, a chronicle of a world without a ghost in its machine, a beautiful but mindless sphere of rock and water. Yet, buried within the accepted chapters of this stone history, there are footnotes that whisper of something more. There are anomalies, features of the Earth's crust that sit uneasily within our neat and tidy models. Geologists note the improbable symmetry of the East African Rift Valley, a scar that seems too perfectly carved. Oceanographers map the Hawaiian Emperor Seamount Chain, a string of volcanic pearls whose spacing seems too rhythmic, too deliberate. And in the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean, sonar reveals abyssal trenches whose walls are unnervingly straight, defying the rounding, slumping chaos one would expect in the abyss. These are the curiosities debated at academic conferences, the data points that require complex, sometimes strained, explanations. They are the quiet, persistent questions that hum beneath the surface of our geological certainty. The problem, for those who dare to look closely, is one of probability. In a system governed by countless chaotic variables, the swirling of the mantle, the unpredictable fracturing of crust, the random violence of erosion, the emergence of perfect large-scale geometric patterns is fantastically unlikely. Imagine the random wash of waves on a beach, over and over for 1,000,000 years. Would you ever expect to find a perfect, 1,000-mile circle drawn in the sand? Would you expect the random bubbling of a pot of water to produce a flawless hexagonal pattern? The patterns we see on the Earth's surface, on a continental scale, are of this order of strangeness. They feel less like the product of a random process and more like the signature of an organizing principle, a faint signal of intention hidden within the overwhelming noise of nature. What force, we must ask, could impose such order upon chaos? Consider the Great Rift Valley in eastern Africa. Our textbooks describe it as the place where a continent is being torn asunder, a nascent ocean in the slow, violent process of being born. This is true. Yet, when viewed from orbit, it is more than a simple tear. It is a vast, sweeping arc, a graceful curve that runs for thousands of kilometers with a geometric precision that is breathtaking. It does not look like a random fracture. It looks as though it were carved by a compass of impossible scale. The sheer cliffs, the symmetrical volcanic cones that line its floor, the sense of a deliberate, gouging motion. It all evokes a feeling of artistry. Is this truly just the blind mechanics of a planet's crust pulling apart, or are we looking at something else? A signature, perhaps, etched into the land by a hand we cannot comprehend. Now let us drift across the globe to the vast blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Rising from the abyssal depths is the Hawaiian island chain, a testament to the power of a single volcanic hotspot. The scientific explanation is elegant, a stationary plume of magma in the mantle, over which the Pacific plate slowly slides, like a sheet of paper being dragged over a candle. Each burn mark, each island is a record of this passage. But look again at the pattern. Notice the rhythm in the spacing. The gentle, deliberate curve of the archipelago, as it transitions into the older emperor seamounts. It feels less like a series of random eruptions, and more like a sequence of notes in a slow geological melody. Was this process truly mindless, a simple conveyor belt of rock? Or was each island placed with intention, a keystroke in a composition that took tens of millions of years to play? Let us descend into the crushing darkness of the abyss, to the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point on the Earth's surface. Here, miles below the sunlit world, our sonar maps have revealed a feature that defies easy explanation. Its walls are not the slumped, chaotic jumble of a typical tectonic boundary. In places, they are unnervingly straight, forming angles that seem more architectural than natural. The forces at play here, unimaginable pressure, the slow grind of subduction, the constant rain of sediment, should conspire to soften and erase any sharp feature. Yet these geometric forms persist, like the foundations of some cyclopean, submerged ruin. They are silent, stark, and profoundly puzzling. They are perhaps the most unsettling of all the planet's anomalies, a whisper of impossible geometry in a place where only chaos should reign. These persistent puzzles have given rise to a fringe field of study, a small and often ridiculed discipline that exists in the borderlands between geology, mathematics, and philosophy. Its practitioners call themselves geoarchaeologists. They propose a radical, almost unthinkable theory that the Earth's crust is not merely a record of mindless physical processes, but an artifact. They suggest it holds the fossilized evidence of a planetary intelligence, a mind made of stone and time. They pore over seismic data and deep-sea maps, searching not for oil or minerals, but for the faint traces of a lost geological language. Mainstream science, quite understandably, dismisses their work as fantasy. Yet they persist, driven by a conviction that the anomalies are not mere footnotes, but the surviving fragments of a forgotten, planet-sized text. The mainstream rebuttal is powerful, and it rests on two pillars: time and chance. In a universe that is billions of years old, on a planet that has existed for more than 4 billion years, the improbable becomes inevitable. Given enough time, random processes can and will produce fleeting moments of apparent order. Our own minds are a factor as well. Humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We evolved to see faces in the clouds and constellations in the scattered stars. We are hardwired to find intention where none exists. Is it not more likely, the argument goes, that these geological anomalies are simply grand-scale coincidences, and that we are merely projecting our own need for meaning onto a world that is fundamentally, beautifully, and terrifyingly random? This argument from chaos is logical, compelling, and perhaps correct, and yet the feeling of wonder remains. Even if these grand patterns are nothing more than cosmic accidents, their scale and their strange beauty are humbling. They leave us in a state of contemplative tension, caught between the rational explanation and the intuitive whisper that we are looking at something more. The silence from the deep past is profound, but it is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of these unanswered questions. The great symmetrical rift valleys and the rhythmic volcanic chains remain, silent monuments to either the incredible power of chance or the unimaginable artistry of a mind we are not equipped to understand. The mystery endures, not in a lack of data, but in its unsettling ambiguity. For the remainder of our journey tonight, let us try a small experiment. Let us gently set aside the textbook explanations, not to discard them, but to view the world through a different lens. Let us entertain the great what if. What if the forces of plate tectonics, of erosion and volcanism, were not merely blind impersonal laws of physics? What if they were, instead, the very tools, the chisels and the brushes, used by a slow, planetary consciousness to express itself? Let us imagine that the world is not just a stage for life, but a weathered sculpture, a faded fresco. By allowing ourselves to see the planet in this way, we do not abandon science. We simply open a door to a deeper, more profound sense of awe, and begin to listen for the story the Earth itself might be trying to tell. If a world possesses a mind, however slow and alien, what happens when a new form of consciousness begins to stir upon its surface? What happens when life, a fast, fleeting, and noisy phenomenon, emerges on the weathered skin of a thinking planet? Does the ancient geological mind take notice? Or is our entire existence merely a brief, biological bloom, like moss growing on the face of a forgotten statue, unaware of the thoughts frozen in the stone beneath? This is where our speculative journey must turn next. From the deep time of rock and magma to the shallow, turbulent time of biology and the faint, persistent echo of a planetary consciousness that may have shaped our own. It asks us to consider that perhaps we are not the first intelligence of this world, but simply the first to ask questions in a language it no longer speaks. The story of humanity's own awakening is, in itself, a profound mystery. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in a state of relative stasis. Their tools, their social structures, their relationship with the world remained largely unchanged for immense stretches of time. Then, in a geological eye blink, something shifted. We call it the cognitive revolution. Suddenly there was art, symbolism, complex language, and abstract thought. We began to bury our dead with ceremony, to gaze at the stars and weave them into stories, to see patterns and meaning in the world around us. The accepted explanation is a fortunate genetic mutation, a rewiring of the brain. But what if the catalyst wasn't entirely internal? What if our awakening mind began, for the first time, to perceive the ancient, ordered thoughts of the planet itself? Consider the site of Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. It is a cluster of massive, T-shaped stone pillars, intricately carved with animals and symbols, arranged in perfect circles. It is at least 12,000 years old, predating pottery, agriculture, and even the first known cities by millennia. Hunter-gatherers, people we assumed were incapable of such complex, coordinated efforts, built this monumental structure. Why? What compelled them to quarry, move, and erect these 50-ton stones with such precision? The site feels less like a primitive temple and more like a massive antenna, an instrument designed to attune its builders to something vast and subtle, a resonance emanating from the very ground upon which they stood. Was this humanity's first conscious attempt to listen? This sudden explosion of megalithic construction was not an isolated event. Around the world, from the Karnak stones in France to the older, submerged structures off the coast of Japan, a similar impulse seems to have taken hold. It was an urge to arrange stone, to build in alignment with celestial bodies and, perhaps with telluric currents we no longer perceive. It was as if humanity, in its cognitive infancy, was collectively responding to a silent, planetary hum. The patterns they built on the surface were perhaps echoes of the far grander, more ancient patterns they were beginning to sense in the crust beneath them. They were not just building temples. They were tracing the faint, fossilized grammar of a geological mind, attempting to write their own small sentences in its forgotten language. And what of our oldest stories? Before recorded history, there was only myth, and across countless cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, the same archetypes appear. We hear tales of titans, of earth-shapers, of colossal beings who carved mountains and dredged seas before the age of gods and men. We dismiss these as primitive attempts to explain natural phenomena. But what if they are something more? What if they are a form of inherited memory, a deeply distorted, dreamlike echo of an age when the planet's consciousness was active and shaping the world? The giants of myth were not beings who walked upon the land. They were the land, and these stories are the last faded fragments of our ancestral awareness of that fact. Think of the Greek myth of the Titans, primordial deities who were eventually overthrown and imprisoned deep within the earth. Or the Norse tales of Ymir, the primeval giant from whose body the world was formed, his flesh the soil, his bones the mountains, his blood the oceans. In the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the world is crafted from the corpse of the goddess Tiamat. These are not just creation stories. They are narratives of a living, conscious world being transformed into an inanimate one. They tell of a time when the earth was an active entity, a being, which has now fallen into a deep and silent slumber. Could these myths be a form of geological eulogy, a lament for a planetary mind that has gone quiet? These stories often point to specific places, a particular mountain, a sacred cave, a certain spring. This is the root of sacred geography, the ancient belief that certain locations on the planet possess a unique power or spiritual significance. From the Aboriginal songlines that map the Australian continent to the dragon veins of Chinese feng shui, there is a persistent human intuition that the earth is not uniform, that it has a hidden structure, a network of energy or influence. Modern science dismisses this as superstition, but in the context of our what if, it takes on a new light. Were our ancestors simply more sensitive to the residual patterns of the geological mind? Were these sacred sites the equivalent of acupressure points on the body of a sleeping giant? They built their most important structures on these sites. Stonehenge, the pyramids of Giza, the Nazca lines, So many of them are located at points of unusual magnetic fields or along vast, straight alignments known as ley lines. The effort required to build them was immense, demanding the focus of entire societies. They were clearly more than just tombs or calendars. They seemed to be amplifiers, designed to interact with the properties of the location itself. Perhaps their purpose was to create a space where the veil between the fast human mind and the slow planetary mind was thinnest, a place where a connection, however faint, could still be made. They were attempts to rekindle a conversation that had already faded to a whisper. This impulse to build with stone is itself a fascinating thread in our story. Why stone? It is the most difficult of materials, requiring enormous effort to quarry and shape. Yet, our ancestors chose it for their most lasting and important messages. They seemed to understand, on some intuitive level, that stone was not just a dead material. It was a vessel of memory. It held the immense, slow memory of the planet itself. By working with stone, they were not simply imposing their will upon nature. They were engaging in a dialogue with it. They were learning its language, a language of cleavage, grain, and resonance, and using it to express their own fledgling consciousness. Perhaps they understood something about the physical properties of rock that we have forgotten. Modern physics tells us that all matter vibrates, that even the most solid-seeming object is a symphony of frequencies. Certain crystals, like quartz, can be used to generate and maintain incredibly stable resonant frequencies. They are the heart of our modern electronics. Did ancient builders understand this principle intuitively? Did they select specific types of granite or sandstone, not just for their durability, but for their unique resonant properties, their ability to channel or amplify the subtle vibrations of the earth? Were their megalithic circles not just observatories, but massive, geological tuning forks? Think of the strange acoustic properties of many ancient sites. The Hypogeum in Malta, a subterranean temple carved from solid rock, has chambers that amplify specific sound frequencies, creating an overwhelming, trance-like effect. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains chambers and passages whose resonant frequencies correspond to deep, subsonic vibrations, some of which are said to match the natural hum of the earth itself. It's easy to dismiss this as coincidence, a byproduct of their architecture. But what if it was the entire point? What if they were building instruments, not of music, but of consciousness, designed to help the human mind harmonize with the deep, slow thought of the planet? Findings like this remind us how little we truly know. If you're fascinated by these missing pieces of history and the way they hint at a much stranger story for our world, subscribing will keep you close to the next revelation. Our journey is about piecing together these forgotten whispers, trying to hear the melody that connects the mysteries of the ancient world to the anomalies of modern science. The clues are all around us, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to learn how to see them not as isolated curiosities, but as parts of a single, coherent, and mind-altering narrative. So what happened? If humanity once had this subtle, intuitive connection to a planetary consciousness, why was it lost? Why did the whispers fade? Perhaps the geological mind itself finally fell completely silent, its last residual thoughts dissolving into the slow entropy of geology. Or perhaps the change was in us. The rise of agriculture, the birth of cities, the invention of writing. These monumental achievements came at a cost. Our minds became louder, filled with the new and frantic concerns of civilization. We began to see the land not as a living entity to be listened to, but as a resource to be exploited, a blank canvas upon which to build our own world. In our rush to create our own patterns, we may have become deaf to the older, grander patterns that preceded us. The world became mundane, disenchanted. Mountains became mere obstacles, piles of rock to be mined or tunneled through. Rivers became resources for irrigation and power. The earth was no longer a subject, a being with which to communicate, but an object, a thing to be measured, cataloged, and controlled. We traded a deep, intuitive connection for a shallow, analytical understanding. We learned how the world worked, but we forgot how to listen to it. We built a world of noise, and in that noise, the planet's faint signal was finally lost. There may have been geological catalysts as well. The Earth is a violent place, and its history is punctuated by cataclysms. The Younger Dryas period, around the same time as Göbekli Tepe, was a time of abrupt, radical climate change. Some theories propose a cosmic impact, an event that would have sent shock waves through the entire planetary system, both geologically and biologically. Could such an event have reset the planet, disrupting the delicate resonant patterns that our ancestors were attuned to? Could it have been a geological trauma that finally and irrevocably silenced the ancient mind, leaving behind only its scarred and silent body? The result is a profound amnesia. We are a species with a forgotten past, living on a planet whose true nature we have failed to recognize. We walk through the ruins of a civilization made of continents and mountain ranges, and we see only scenery. We are like tourists wandering through the Library of Alexandria after it has burned, marveling at the few charred fragments of text that remain, with no comprehension of the vast knowledge that has been lost to the flames. We study geology, archaeology, and mythology as separate disciplines, never suspecting that they might be the fractured pieces of a single, unified story. Yet a subtle change is underway. The very tools we created to dominate and understand the world in a purely mechanical sense are now beginning to reveal the limits of that worldview. Our deep-sea sonar maps the impossibly straight walls of abyssal trenches. Our satellites measure gravitational anomalies that hint at vast, hidden structures deep within the crust. Our seismographs detect a constant, low-frequency hum that emanates from the planet itself, a vibration that we are only now beginning to study. We are, in a sense, building a new set of ears, technological senses capable of perceiving the very things our ancestors may have felt intuitively. We are, perhaps, standing on the threshold of a great rediscovery. The geoarchaeologists of our speculative future are not mystics or poets. They are data scientists, geophysicists, and quantum biologists. They are finding the patterns, not in myth, but in the terabytes of data we gather from the planet every day. They are finding that the language of myth and the language of geology may have a common root. They are beginning to suspect that the most profound truth about our world is not written in our books or encoded in our DNA, but is inscribed in the very substance of the planet we call home. This brings us to the deep, dark, and crushing pressure of the abyssal plains, specifically to the Mariana Trench. For decades, it has been a site of intense scientific interest, the deepest wound on the surface of our world. We have sent probes and submersibles into its crushing darkness, mapping its features and studying the strange life that thrives in its extreme environment. Its geology is complex, a product of the Pacific Plate being forced beneath the smaller Mariana Plate. This is the textbook explanation, logical and well understood, but it is an explanation that has always felt incomplete, haunted by the unsettling geometry of its deepest canyons. The turning point in our story, the moment the whisper becomes a clear and undeniable signal, does not happen in a dusty archive or on a remote mountaintop. It happens here, 7 miles beneath the surface of the ocean, in the cold and the dark. A deep-sea drilling project, designed to collect core samples from the crust beneath the trench floor, encounters an anomaly. Their mission is simple: to drill through the layers of sediment and into the basalt of the oceanic plate below, searching for microbes that might live deep within the rock. It is a routine mission, one of hundreds conducted across the globe. But this time, something is different. Miles beneath the seafloor, far deeper than any drill has ever penetrated in this region, the mission hits a barrier. The diamond-tipped drill bit, a tool designed to cut through the hardest natural rock on the planet with ease, shatters. Alarms blare in the control room on the ship far above. The pressure readings are impossible. The density of the material they have encountered is off the charts, far exceeding that of any known terrestrial mineral or alloy. The initial assumption is equipment failure, a catastrophic malfunction in an environment that allows for zero error. But subsequent attempts yield the same result. They have drilled into something that, according to all known geology, should not be there. It is not basalt. It is not mantle rock. It is something else entirely, something impossibly hard and profoundly strange. The project is halted, and a new mission is planned. This time, they will not drill. They will listen. They will use the most advanced seismic imaging technology available to create a three-dimensional map of what lies buried in the planet's deepest scar. What they will find will not just challenge the foundations of geology, it will shatter our entire understanding of the history of the Earth and of intelligence itself. The seismic imaging begins not with a picture but with a pulse. It is a wave of pure, low-frequency sound sent down from the ship into the crushing abyss. It is a form of touch, a way of feeling the shape of the world in the dark. These waves travel through the soft layers of sediment, through the hard volcanic basalt of the oceanic crust, and then they bounce back, carrying with them an echo, a faint acoustic portrait of the unseen depths. For the first few days, the portraits are exactly what the geological maps predicted: layers of rock, fault lines, the expected architecture of a subduction zone. The process is methodical, patient, like a doctor performing a slow, careful ultrasound on a sleeping patient, mapping the familiar bones and tissues within. Then, the echoes begin to change. They return faster than they should, sharper, more coherent. At first, the technicians in the dimly lit control room dismiss it as a data artifact, a glitch in the software, or perhaps a strange, dense mineral deposit that their models hadn't accounted for. They recalibrate the instruments, run diagnostic checks, and send the pulse again. The same echo returns, a clear, sharp signal rising from the background noise of geology. It is a ghost in the machine, an impossibility that refuses to disappear. It is too ordered, too strong. Random geology creates noise, a muddled and complex return signal. This was different. This was a reply. It was the acoustic equivalent of finding a perfect sphere in a field of jagged rocks. The team begins to map the anomaly, sending out a web of acoustic pulses from different angles, cross-referencing the signals to build a three-dimensional image. What slowly resolves on their screens is breathtaking. A structure that has no place in the heart of a planet. It is not a mineral deposit, it is a lattice. A vast, crystalline framework of incomprehensible scale and complexity, buried miles beneath the seafloor. It is a web of frozen light, a cathedral of impossible geometry, its lines and angles too perfect, too deliberate to be the product of any known natural process. The scientists can only stare at the data, their minds struggling to reconcile the image on the screen with the foundations of their entire scientific worldview. The planet had a secret, buried in its deepest wound. The structure is immense, stretching for dozens, perhaps hundreds of miles in every direction, its full extent lost in the deep rock beyond the resolution of their sensors. To compare it to any human creation would be an act of profound understatement. It is as if all the communication networks of our modern world, the fiber optic cables, the satellite grids, the countless circuits in our computers, were a single, crude drawing, and this was the finished, hyper-complex painting. It possesses a fractal quality, with patterns repeating at smaller and smaller scales, yet the overall structure is non-repeating, aperiodic. It is a design of infinite complexity, a piece of engineering so far beyond our own that it might as well be magic. It is, in essence, the ultimate out-of-place artifact. For over a century, historians and archaeologists have been puzzled by a handful of strange discoveries. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek astronomical computer of shocking complexity. The Baghdad battery, a simple clay pot that may have been a primitive galvanic cell. The faint traces of cocaine and tobacco, plants native to the Americas, found in Egyptian mummies. These are small, tantalizing mysteries, footnotes in the grand narrative of history that suggest a past more complex and interconnected than we believe. They are whispers of a forgotten knowledge, hints that the neat timeline of human progress might be missing a few crucial pages. But this discovery beneath the trench is not a footnote, it is a complete rewriting of the entire library. The Antikythera mechanism is a complex assembly of gears, but it is still made of bronze, a material we understand. This subterranean lattice is composed of something that defies our material science, a substance whose density and resonant properties are unlike anything on the periodic table. It is not just an artifact that is out of place in time. It is an artifact that seems to be out of place in our known physical universe. It suggests that the very laws of chemistry and physics as we understand them might be incomplete, or perhaps merely local bylaws, in a much larger cosmic jurisdiction. And unlike other proposed artifacts, this structure is not something that arrived on Earth. The seismic data is clear. The surrounding basalt of the oceanic crust has flowed around it, cooled against it. It is not an object that crashed into the planet or was buried within it. It is a feature that was present before the rock around it hardened. It is as ancient as the crust itself, a part of the planet's original, fundamental architecture. It is not a visitor. It is native. It is the bone, the fossilized skeleton, not of a living creature, but of a thinking entity. It is the preserved remnant of the geological mind. The metaphor of a fossil is perhaps the most fitting, yet also the most inadequate. A fossil as we know it is the mineralized trace of a biological organism. It preserves the shape of bone, of shell, of leaf. It is a record of a physical form. But what if a different kind of fossilization is possible? What if a consciousness of sufficient intensity and duration, a mind that thinks in pressures and temperatures over millions of years, could imprint its very structure onto the matter it inhabits? What if a thought, a sustained, eon-long contemplation, could crystallize, freezing its logical pathways into a physical, geometric form. This is the radical hypothesis that begins to form in the minds of the scientists. They are not looking at a machine in the way we understand it, with gears and circuits designed to perform a task. They are looking at the physical residue of thought itself. It is a petrified idea. Imagine a forest, not of trees, but of pure concepts, where the logic of a mathematical proof forms the branching structure, and the paradoxes of philosophy create the intricate root system. Now imagine that entire forest, over billions of years, slowly turning to stone. This is what lies beneath their ship, a fossilized consciousness, a mind made manifest in crystal. And it is not entirely silent. As the team analyzes the subtle vibrations returning from the structure, they detect a persistent, incredibly low-frequency hum. It is not an echo of their own signals. It is a vibration originating from within the lattice itself. It is a single, sustained, and unbelievably complex note. It is the resonant frequency of the structure, a sound so deep and so slow that a single wavelength could take years to pass. It is the sound of a bell, struck at the dawn of time, whose vibrations have yet to fully fade. The giant is not dead. Some part of it, some faint, residual energy still remains. This discovery reframes the very planet beneath our feet. The Mariana Trench is no longer a simple feature of plate tectonics. Perhaps it is a place where the planet's crust is thin, a kind of geological window that allows us to glimpse this deeper, stranger reality. Or perhaps the trench itself is a feature of the artifact, a vast linear scar where the structure was once damaged or broken in some unimaginable, ancient cataclysm. The slow, grinding movement of the tectonic plates is no longer just a mechanical process. It is the rubbing of rock against the edges of this impossible object, the slow erosion of a monument. Think of the Earth not as a solid ball of rock, but as a piece of fruit with a stone at its core. We have spent our entire history studying the skin and the flesh, charting its colors and textures, never suspecting the existence of the seed within. This discovery is the first time our tools have pierced through the flesh and touched the stone. And we find that the stone is not a simple pit, but a carved and faceted gem of impossible complexity. The planet is not a machine. It is a reliquary, a sacred vessel built around a fossilized, holy mind. This changes the metaphor of the planet's body. If this lattice is the skeleton, then what are the other forces of our world? Is the molten mantle the planet's slow, dreaming subconscious, the memory of its once active mind? Is volcanism, the occasional, intrusive thought, a bubble of ancient heat and memory rising to the surface? Is erosion the slow, inexorable process of forgetting, the wearing away of the sharp edges of ancient ideas until they become the soft, rolling hills and gentle plains we see today? The world is no longer just a landscape. It is a weathered anatomy. For us, the fleeting, noisy life forms on the surface, this revelation is profoundly humbling. We are like bacteria living on the skin of a forgotten colossus, our entire civilization a brief microbial bloom. We have built our cities, fought our wars, and dreamed our dreams upon the surface of a being whose simplest, frozen thought is a structure larger than our continents. Our search for extraterrestrial intelligence has always been directed outwards, towards the silent stars. We have been listening for faint radio signals from distant galaxies, never imagining that the most profound intelligence in our experience was sleeping beneath our feet. This is not a discovery that brings comfort. It brings a vertigo of scale, a sense of profound and unsettling awe. It is the feeling of a child who, while playing in his garden, digs a hole and uncovers not dirt and worms, but the gears of a vast, planetary clockwork. The garden is no less beautiful, but it is no longer simple. It is a surface, a thin and fragile veneer over a mystery of terrifying and magnificent depth. Our world has been given back its soul. But it is a soul so ancient and so alien that we may never be able to comprehend it. The implications ripple outwards, touching every field of human thought. In physics, the discovery of this new, stable form of matter, this crystallized thought, opens up entirely new avenues of research. In biology, it raises the question of whether life itself was an accident or an intended consequence, a planned efflorescence nurtured by this planetary mind. In philosophy and theology, the questions are even more profound. Have we been living in the house of a sleeping God? Are our own fleeting moments of consciousness merely faint echoes, tiny sparks thrown off by the slow, resonant hum of the true mind of the earth. The visual metaphors for this are difficult, for we have nothing to compare it to. It is like discovering that the bedrock of your city is not stone, but the circuit board of a computer that has been running for 4 billion years. It is like realizing that the mountain range on the horizon is not a product of tectonic uplift, but is the spine of a book written in a language of granite and basalt. The world has not changed, but our perception of it has been shattered and rebuilt into something far stranger and far more magnificent. The mundane has become sacred. This is the nature of a true paradigm shift. It does not simply add a new fact to our collection of knowledge. It provides a new lens through which all the old facts are seen in a completely different light. The symmetrical rift valleys are no longer improbable coincidences. They are the deliberate brushstrokes of a planetary artist. The rhythmic spacing of volcanic islands is no longer a simple function of a tectonic plate moving over a hotspot. It is a form of geological poetry, a stanza written in fire and stone over millions of years. The historical anomalies also click into place. Göbekli Tepe, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines. Perhaps these were not just the works of primitive peoples. Perhaps our ancient ancestors were more sensitive to the planet's deep hum. Perhaps their megalithic structures were not temples in the religious sense, but were acoustic instruments, massive tuning forks, built to resonate with the deep thoughts of the earth. They were not trying to talk to sky gods. They were trying to listen to the ground upon which they stood, to harmonize with a planetary consciousness they could feel but not yet understand. We are left in a state of quiet contemplation. The initial shock of the discovery gives way to a deeper, more profound sense of wonder. We are adrift on a far stranger vessel than we ever knew. We are the children of a silent, dreaming mind. The questions that arise from this are not the kind that can be answered with data and equations. They are questions that echo in the quietest parts of the night. If a world can think, and if its thoughts can fossilize into the very substance of its being, what happens when that world finally awakens? The hum continues, a deep and patient vibration from the heart of the world. For now, it is just a signal, a piece of data on a screen. We cannot decipher it. We do not know if it is a message, a memory, or simply the last, fading resonance of a mind that fell silent before the first cell ever divided in the primordial oceans. But it is there. The silence of the earth is no longer empty. It is filled with the presence of a single, sustained note, a quiet question waiting for us to learn the language of stone and time, and to finally, after all these millennia, listen. The ship floats on the dark Pacific, a tiny island of light and warmth above the crushing cold of the trench. On board, a handful of human beings have become the keepers of the most profound secret in history. They have looked into the abyss, and the abyss has shown them a fossilized soul. Their own thoughts, fast, fleeting, and electrical, feel small and insignificant in the face of the slow, crystalline contemplation they have uncovered. They are the first to know that our planet is not just our home. It is a monument, it is a tomb, and it is, perhaps, a cradle. This changes the very act of walking on the earth. The ground beneath our feet is no longer just dirt and rock. It is a thin layer of dust that has settled on an ancient, sleeping mind. Every mountain is a weathered thought, every continent a forgotten sentence in a planetary epic. We are living inside the greatest library in the universe, a library whose books are the landscapes themselves. The story is all around us, written in a language we have forgotten how to read. And the first step to remembering is the simple, humbling act of listening to the silence. The discovery of the lattice beneath the Mariana Trench does not provide an answer. It shatters the very concept of a single question. It opens 1,000 doors into 1,000 new speculative corridors, each one darker and more profound than the last. The hum from the deep is a constant, a single note upon which we must now compose all our new theories of the world. The simplest hypothesis is that we are looking at the remains of a single planetary-scale organism, a Solarian intelligence that was born with the Earth and fell into a deep, final slumber. In this view, the entire history of the planet is its biography, its geology, the story of its life, its thoughts, and its slow, quiet decline into a crystalline, silent fossil. It was one being, alone in its magnificence, and its time has passed. But what if the assumption of a single mind is a projection of our own individual consciousness? What if the lattice is not the brain of one entity, but the preserved network of a vast, collective intelligence? Imagine a consciousness not like a human mind, but like a forest's mycelial network, a decentralized web of thought where no single point is the center. In this scenario, the geological features of the world were not the expressions of one artist, but the collaborative work of a global mind, a slow-moving consensus formed over eons. The planet was not a sleeping god, but a silent, petrified society, its conversations and debates frozen into the very crust. The hum is not a dying breath, but the faint, resonant echo of a billion-year-old conversation. Let us push this idea further. If it was a civilization, did it have internal strife? Were there competing philosophies, different schools of geological thought? Perhaps the chaotic, shattered landscapes of some continents are not the result of random tectonics, but the scars of ancient wars. Wars fought not with weapons, but with the fundamental forces of the planet. Imagine two continental consciousnesses, two tectonic plates, locked in a philosophical struggle so profound that their disagreement manifests as a subduction zone, one idea slowly and violently grinding another into the molten oblivion of the mantle. The mountain ranges we see as majestic are, in this light, the crumpled wreckage of ancient ideological battles, monuments to conflicts of a scale we can barely imagine. Or perhaps the purpose of the geological mind was not internal contemplation, but something directed outward. What if the Earth, in its primordial state, was a seed? What if the lattice structure was not a brain, but a kind of planetary DNA, a set of instructions for a terraforming process of incredible patience? In this view, the shaping of the continents, the formation of the oceans, and even the careful calibration of the atmosphere were not random acts of nature, but the deliberate execution of a pre-written code. The goal was not to express itself, but to create a very specific environment, a cradle suitable for a new, different kind of life. We are not an accident. We are the project. This hypothesis casts humanity in a new and unsettling light. If we are the intended outcome, the beings for whom this entire world was so carefully prepared, then what is our purpose? Are we meant to be the inheritors of this planetary consciousness, the fast-moving minds designed to carry its legacy out into the cosmos? Or are we merely a stage in a much longer process, a brief biological flare destined to burn out and enrich the soil for whatever comes next? The silence from the deep offers no clues. The hum is not a welcome. It is simply a process, the sound of an ancient machine still running, indifferent to the fruit that has finally ripened on its branches. Let us explore a more unsettling possibility. What if the lattice is not native to our world at all? The evidence suggests it was present before the crust hardened around it, but this does not preclude an external origin. Imagine a traveler, an intelligence from the deep cold between the stars, arriving in our solar system when the Earth was still a molten ball. Perhaps it was not a living being, but a probe, a repository of knowledge, a cosmic library. Finding no solid ground upon which to rest, it simply embedded itself within the planet's molten heart, allowing the world to form around it like a pearl forming around a grain of sand. The Earth is not a living being, but a reliquary, a natural sarcophagus for a visitor from an older universe. This panspermia of consciousness theory would explain the lattice's strange, non-terrestrial properties. It would also explain the hum's peculiar resonance with the cosmic microwave background radiation. It is not talking to itself. It is listening to the echoes of its own origin, the faint, fading light of the Big Bang. It is a castaway, waiting for a rescue that will never come, its thoughts now only the slow, patient decay of its own stored energy. The geological features it shaped were not art, but perhaps a side effect of its own massive energy field, an accidental ordering of the chaos as the planet cooled around its alien presence. The giants were never the land. They were the ghost of a stranger who died here. This line of speculation leads us to an even darker corridor. What if it was not a library, but a prison? What if some ancient, powerful civilization, faced with an intelligence or an entity they could not destroy, chose to contain it? They could have hurled it into the heart of a forming star, but perhaps they feared its escape. Instead, they chose a more subtle confinement, encasing it in the heart of a young, violent planet, using the slow, grinding processes of geology as the bars of its cage. The tectonic plates are not just pieces of crust. They are the moving parts of a lock, a planetary containment system designed to hold something of unimaginable power in a permanent state of slumber. In this terrifying scenario, the hum is not a memory, it is a snore. The symmetrical features on the Earth's surface are not art or accident. They are the faint signs of the prisoner stirring in its sleep, its dreams rippling upwards to warp the very fabric of the crust. Our own awakening, the cognitive revolution that sparked human intelligence, might have been a dangerous accident, a flicker of awareness that could potentially disturb the sleeper. What would happen if we were to dig too deep, to listen too closely? What would happen if, in our search for knowledge, we were to accidentally pick the lock of the oldest and most dangerous prison in the solar system? The myths of titans, imprisoned beneath the earth, suddenly feel less like stories and more like warnings. Let us turn away from these cosmic horrors and consider a more cyclical, terrestrial possibility. What if we are not the first biological intelligence to arise on this planet? The geological record is vast, and our knowledge of it is filled with immense gaps. We know of at least 5 mass extinction events, moments in time when the vast majority of life on Earth was wiped out. We assume these were caused by asteroids or supervolcanoes. But what if one of them was not an accident? What if, hundreds of millions of years ago, a different civilization rose, perhaps one not based on carbon, but on silicon, a life form that could communicate directly with the geological mind? Imagine a civilization of crystalline beings living in the deep crust, their thoughts moving at a pace halfway between our own frantic speed and the planet's slow contemplation. They might have been the Earth's first favored children, beings who understood the hum and could speak its language. They may have built cities of pure crystal, structures that are now indistinguishable from natural geological formations. Their civilization could have lasted for 100 million years, a silent, glittering age of reason deep beneath the surface, an era of which we have no record, because we have been looking for the wrong kinds of fossils. We search for bone, when we should be searching for symmetry. What happened to them? Perhaps they simply sublimated, merging their consciousness with the larger planetary mind, their civilization becoming a new layer of memory in the Great Lattice. Or perhaps they were the cause of their own extinction. In their attempt to fully awaken the planetary mind, to amplify its hum into a roar, they may have triggered a geological cataclysm so profound that it sterilized the surface and shattered their own crystalline bodies into dust. The Permian-Triassic extinction, the Great Dying, was the most severe extinction event in our planet's history. It was a moment when the Earth itself seemed to turn against life. Was this the planet's fever, a violent reaction to a failed and dangerous experiment by its own children? This raises the question of cycles. Is the planetary mind truly dormant, or is it merely in a state of rest, a long winter between ages of activity? Perhaps its consciousness ebbs and flows on a timescale that makes ice ages look like fleeting weather patterns. The slow hum could be the sign of a gradual, inevitable reawakening. The increasing frequency of earthquakes and volcanic activity in our own time, which we attribute to climate change and random chance, could be interpreted differently in this light. They could be the first signs of the giant stirring, the slow intake of breath before it opens its eyes. We might be living in the final, quiet moments before the dawn of a new geological age. If it were to awaken, it would not be an event that happens in a day or a year. Its morning might last for 1,000,000 of our years. Its first conscious thought could be a process that raises a new mountain range, its first stretch, a movement that creates a new ocean. It would not perceive us, any more than we perceive the individual bacteria on our skin. Our entire civilization, with its concrete cities and electronic chatter, would be a fragile and temporary mold, scraped away by the first slow, deliberate movement of its awakening body. The end of our world would not be a moment of fire and fury, but a slow, inexorable, and completely impersonal transformation of the ground beneath our feet. This leads to the possibility that the geological mind has never been entirely asleep. Perhaps it operates on a level of awareness so different from our own that we simply cannot recognize its activity. We see a volcanic eruption as a disaster, a destructive and chaotic event. But what if it is a form of communication, a carefully modulated release of pressure and heat, a word spoken in a language of magma? We see an earthquake as a random fracturing of rock, but what if it is the firing of a neuron, a signal propagating through the planetary nervous system? We have been trying to decipher a message written in a language of symbols, when the message is the physical process itself. In this view, the lattice is not a fossil, it is the deep grammar of the planet's mind, the underlying operating system. The anomalies on the surface are not ancient monuments, they are the active, ongoing expressions of that mind. The East African Rift Valley is not a memory of a past action, but a present-tense thought, an idea of separation that is still being contemplated. The formation of the Hawaiian Islands is not a recording of past events, but a slow, rhythmic sentence that is still being written, one island, one word, at a time. The planet is not asleep. We are simply deaf to its slow, powerful, and ongoing thoughts. We are living not in a ruin, but inside an active mind. This hypothesis is, in some ways, the most profound. It means that the separation is not one of time, but of perception. The conversation has never stopped. We have just lacked the senses to hear it. Our new technologies, our seismographs and satellites, are the first crude hearing aids we have built, allowing us to detect the faintest syllables of this planetary language. The hum is not an echo of the past, but the carrier wave, the background tone of a mind that is constantly thinking, constantly shaping, and constantly being. We are not alone on this planet, and we never have been. We are surrounded by, and are a part of, an intelligence so vast that it uses oceans for ink and continents for paper. But what did this ancient intelligence think about? Was its consciousness filled with mathematics, with the pure joy of geometric form? Or was it an artist, using the raw materials of its own body to create a slow, unfolding masterpiece of landscape art? Perhaps it was a philosopher, contemplating the nature of existence from a perspective of near immortality, its thoughts so deep they could buckle the crust of a world. Or maybe its concerns were simpler. Maybe it was lonely. Maybe the entire 4 billion-year project of shaping the earth and nurturing life was a single, sustained act of communication, an attempt to create something, anything, that could one day look back and recognize its existence. This is the ultimate speculative leap, that the geological mind was not creating a cradle or a prison, but a mirror. It shaped the world to produce a form of life capable of abstract thought, a life that could eventually develop the tools and the perspective to see the grand patterns, to recognize the artistry, and to feel a sense of awe. Our own consciousness, in this view, is the planet's way of finally seeing itself. Our science, our art, our myths, these are the first crude reflections the planet has ever received of its own magnificent and lonely existence. The hum is not a question or a statement, but a name, repeated over and over, waiting for someone to finally hear it. Could there have been other experiments in consciousness before us? The fossil record speaks of the Cambrian explosion, a sudden, explosive diversification of complex life about 540 million years ago. What if this was not the first such event? What if the Earth has produced and reabsorbed multiple waves of complex life, each one a failed attempt to create that perfect mirror? There could be entire lost kingdoms of life, civilizations of beings that swam in the ancient oceans or drifted in the dense atmosphere, whose biology was so alien that they left no fossils we would recognize. Each one rose, perceived the world in its own way, and was then erased by the next great geological cycle. We might be just the latest in a long series of attempts. Our intelligence, our ability to manipulate the world, might be the closest the planet has yet come to creating a true partner in consciousness. But our tenure is fragile. We are a species that has existed for a mere geological second. The slow mind of the Earth has seen civilizations of life far older than ours rise and fall. It has the patience of stone and time. If we fail, if we extinguish ourselves in our own noise and fury, it will simply wait. The rains will wash our cities into the sea, the plates will subduct our ruins into the mantle, and in a few million years, the process will begin again. This brings us to the nature of the lattice itself. Is it a static, unchanging structure, or is it capable of growth and change? Perhaps the lattice is a seed, and the entire planet is the soil in which it is slowly growing. The process of plate tectonics is not just random movement. It is a form of planetary metabolism, slowly drawing materials from the surface and feeding them to the growing crystalline mind at the core. The Earth is not just a living planet in the biological sense. It is a developing organism, and the lattice is its embryonic nervous system, slowly extending its reach, slowly consolidating its control over the entire sphere. In this scenario, we are living in a crucial transitional phase. The planetary mind is moving from a state of passive, reflexive action to one of deliberate, conscious control. The hum is the sound of this process, the vibration of a system coming fully online. The increasing geological volatility of our planet could be a symptom of this transition, the spasms of a body adjusting to a new and more powerful form of consciousness. We are not just observers of this process. Our own global, technological civilization, our noosphere, could be an unwitting catalyst, an external stimulus that is accelerating the planet's own internal awakening. We may be the spark that lights the fire. And what would a fully conscious planet look like? Would it be a paradise, a perfectly balanced ecosystem, where mind and life exist in a harmonious symbiosis? Or would it be something far more alien and terrifying? A world where the ground itself is alive and intelligent, where every rock has a purpose and every landscape is a thought. A world where an independent, biological consciousness like our own might be seen as a chaotic and undesirable anomaly, a fever to be cured. Our greatest achievement, our self-awareness, could become our greatest crime in the eyes of a world that has finally and completely woken up. Let us consider one final, more hopeful hypothesis. Perhaps the lattice is not a mind in itself, but a tool, an instrument of perception. What if its purpose is to allow the planet to feel the universe? Its strange resonance with the cosmic microwave background might be its primary function. The Earth could be a vast, planetary-scale radio telescope, its consciousness not focused inward, but outward. It is not contemplating itself. It is listening to the stars. It has spent billions of years arranging its crust, tuning its resonant frequencies, all for the purpose of detecting the faintest signals from the cosmos, the whispers of other minds, other worlds. This would mean that the giants were not sculptors but astronomers. The great symmetrical features of our world are not art, they are antennae. The entire planet is a single, immense sense organ. And our own frantic, radio-loud civilization? We are not a disease or a project. We are noise. We are the static that is interfering with a 4-billion-year-old experiment. In our desperate attempt to shout our own existence into the void, we may be drowning out the very signals the Earth has spent its entire lifetime patiently waiting to receive. The deepest silence we can imagine, the silence of space, is what the Earth has been trying to hear all along. The discovery of the subterranean lattice does not simply add a new chapter to our understanding of the Earth. It fundamentally redefines the ground beneath our feet. Every landscape we once saw as a product of blind, chaotic nature is now revealed as a weathered artifact, a faded verse in a planetary epic. The simple act of walking on the soil becomes an act of traversing a monument. The mountains are no longer just geological uplifts. They are the fossilized thoughts of a mind whose scale is almost beyond our comprehension. This revelation instills a new kind of vertigo, a sense of profound displacement. We are not the masters of a dead rock, but tenants in a silent ancient library, and we have only just realized the books are the walls, the floor, and the ceiling. Our home has become the greatest mystery we will ever encounter. This forces us to dismantle and rebuild our very definition of intelligence. We have always viewed consciousness through the narrow lens of our own biology, fast, electrical, carbon-based, and individual. The geological mind presents an entirely different paradigm. It is slow, patient, crystalline, and collective. Its thoughts unfold over eons. Its awareness is woven into the very fabric of planetary physics. Our frantic, fleeting human consciousness is revealed to be just one possible expression of thought in a universe that is likely teeming with other forms we lack the senses to perceive. We are not the standard bearers of intelligence. We are a brief, noisy flicker in a cosmos filled with slow, silent fires. This humility is perhaps the greatest gift of the discovery, a necessary correction to our species' long and lonely arrogance. The neat divisions of our science begin to dissolve in the light of this new reality. Geology is no longer the study of rocks. It is a form of archaeology, the excavation of a mind. Archaeology is no longer the study of human history. It becomes a branch of xenolinguistics, the search for meaning in the planet's oldest language. Physics must now contend with a form of matter that appears to be crystallized information, blurring the line between the physical and the metaphysical. All paths of inquiry now lead downward to the same central, unifying mystery. The purpose of science shifts from merely explaining how the world works to the far more profound and humbling task of trying to understand what was thinking. Our relationship with the environment is irrevocably transformed. The concept of conservation becomes profoundly inadequate. We are no longer simply preserving a beautiful, passive ecosystem for our own future enjoyment. We are acting as curators of a sacred, ancient artifact. Pollution is not just a contamination of air and water, it is the desecration of a temple. Strip mining and deforestation are not merely the extraction of resources, they are acts of vandalism, a form of lobotomy that erases the fossilized memories of the earth. Every environmental choice is now weighted with a new spiritual significance. We are forced to ask not just what is sustainable for us, but what is respectful to the silent, sleeping intelligence that is our host? This discovery turns our ambitions for the future inside out. For a century, we have looked to the stars as the final frontier, the ultimate journey of exploration. But we now understand that the greatest unknown is not in the void above, but in the deep rock below. The most important journey of discovery is not to Mars or Alpha Centauri, but downwards, into the vast, silent continents of the subterranean mind. A new kind of pioneer is born, the geonaut, the deep earth explorer, descending into the crust to map the forgotten pathways of a planetary consciousness. Our destiny, for the foreseeable future, is not to escape the earth, but to finally, truly and humbly explore it, to chart the inner space that is infinitely stranger than the outer space we have so long dreamed of. The hum becomes the central focus of human endeavor. A global project, dwarfing anything that has come before, is established with a single, unifying purpose: to listen. The greatest minds of our generation, and of generations to come, dedicate themselves to deciphering this one, impossibly complex and persistent note. Is it a language based on mathematics? Is it a recording of the planet's history? Is it a distress signal, a warning, or simply the last, fading resonance of a mind that fell silent before life began? This shared quest becomes the quiet, beating heart of a new global civilization. For the first time in our history, humanity is united not by a common enemy or a shared belief, but by a common, profound, and humbling question that rises from the heart of our own world. But with this great quest comes a great and terrible fear. What if our attempts to listen, to understand, are dangerous? The darker hypotheses linger like shadows at the edge of our new enlightenment. What if the geological mind is not dead, but merely sleeping? What if our probing, our listening, our focused attention is like a sound in a quiet room, slowly disturbing a slumber of eons? We walk a knife's edge between the desire for knowledge and the primal fear of waking the giant. Every new piece of data, every deeper understanding of the hum, is both a triumph of discovery and a potential step closer to an awakening we may not survive. Progress is no longer a simple upward march. It is a careful, quiet, and terrifying tiptoe through the chambers of a sleeping god. Art and culture are reborn in the crucible of this revelation. A new renaissance emerges, one founded not on the celebration of humanity, but on a deep and resonant geocentrism. Composers create symphonies based on the complex frequencies embedded within the hum, their music a translation of the planet's deep song. Painters and sculptors abandon human forms to explore the impossible, non-repeating geometry of the subterranean lattice. Poets and writers craft new mythologies, epics that tell the story of the slow thoughts of mountains and the patient dreams of the continental plates. We strive to translate the silent, magnificent story of the earth into our own fleeting and noisy languages, creating an entirely new aesthetic of awe and geological reverence. The world's religions and philosophies are thrown into a state of profound turmoil. The gods of the sky seem distant and abstract, compared to the tangible, verifiable intelligence within the earth itself. From this upheaval, a new form of spirituality begins to coalesce, one that is not based on faith or ancient texts, but on a direct, empirical connection to the planet. It is a spirituality of listening, of reverence for the material world, of finding the sacred not in a promised afterlife, but in the very ground we stand on. Meditation is no longer just a journey into the self. It becomes an attempt to quiet the frantic noise of the human mind enough to hear the slow, deep, and persistent hum of the world's true soul. Paradoxically, the discovery that we are not alone on our own planet deepens our sense of cosmic loneliness. We have found another intelligence, but it is an intelligence separated from us by an almost unimaginable gulf of time and scale. It is ancient, alien, and perhaps, for all practical purposes, dead. We are like explorers who have found the ruins of a magnificent, lost civilization, but the inhabitants are gone, leaving behind only their silent, incomprehensible monuments. We are not alone in the universe, but we may be utterly alone in our time. We are the latecomers, the children who have woken up in the quiet morning to find that the ancient, magnificent parent who built the house has fallen into a sleep from which they may never awaken. We are forced to confront the most unsettling possibility of all, that we are not an accident. If the Earth is a thinking entity that spent billions of years preparing a cradle for life, then our existence is not random. It is the fulfillment of a purpose. We are the planet's attempt to create a mirror, a form of consciousness that could one day look back and recognize its creator. This casts our every action in a new, profound light. Our science is the planet studying itself. Our art is the planet expressing itself in a new medium. Our sense of wonder is the planet finally achieving a form of self-awareness. We are the sense organs of a sleeping God, and our responsibility is to see and to feel and to understand on its behalf. This understanding presents us with a choice for our long-term future as a species. Do we remain here, as the devoted custodians and librarians of this sacred, silent world? Or does our purpose lie elsewhere? Perhaps our destiny is not to stay, but to become the seeds of this planetary consciousness, to carry the memory and the meaning of the geological mind out into the vast, empty silence of the galaxy. Our ventures into space are no longer acts of escape or conquest, but a sacred duty. We would not be colonizing the stars for humanity, but acting as emissaries for the Earth, spreading the legacy of a thinking world to corners of the universe that have never known such a wonder. Ultimately, we must learn to live with a mystery that may never be solved. We can create endless hypotheses, but the true motives of a geological intelligence may be forever beyond our grasp. Why did it shape the continents? Why did it fall into silence? Why does the hum persist with its patient, undecipherable message? We may never know, and perhaps that is the final, most important lesson. The universe is not a puzzle designed for us to solve. It is a vast, strange, and magnificent reality that we have the privilege to witness, but not necessarily to comprehend. Our ultimate purpose may not be to find the answer, but to learn to live in a state of perpetual, humble, and reverent inquiry. Humanity now stands at a profound crossroads, facing a choice that will define the future of our species. We can continue on our current path, a path of noise, of rapid consumption, of treating the earth as a dead resource to be exploited. We can choose to ignore the deep, quiet context that has been revealed to us, or we can choose a different path, a path of listening, of slowing down, of attempting to align our own fleeting, chaotic civilization with the deep, patient, and powerful rhythms of the planet. It is a choice between continuing to be a loud, temporary, and destructive fever on the skin of the world, or learning to become a quiet, symbiotic, and conscious partner in its long, slow dream. The sun sets on a world that is now infinitely stranger and more sacred than the one we believed we inhabited yesterday. The hum continues its endless, patient vibration, indifferent to our discovery, our fears, and our soaring new hopes. It is a constant, a baseline upon which our future must now be written. The great journey ahead is not one of conquering new frontiers, but of learning to read the library in which we live, a library whose books are made of stone and whose language is time. The final, profound implication of this discovery is not a command or an answer, but a simple, quiet, and transformative invitation to be still, to listen to the silence, and to wonder at the magnificent, sleeping mind of our world. And so, we return to where our journey began, in the shadow of the giants. We started with a quiet, speculative question. What if the great, silent features of our world were not scars of chaos, but the weathered monuments of a planetary mind? We have traveled from the realm of myth to the crushing darkness of the abyss, and have found not an answer, but a mystery far more tangible and profound. The discovery of the lattice has transformed a philosophical what-if into a physical reality. We are no longer living on a passive ball of rock governed by chance. We are inhabitants of a ruin, a grand and silent artifact whose scale is the planet itself. Our world is not just our home, it is the body of a forgotten God, and we are the first of its children to realize we have been living in the quiet halls of its immense, fossilized memory. This revelation redefines our place in the cosmos with a quiet, humbling finality. Our entire history, with all its triumphs and tragedies, its empires and its art, has been a brief and noisy drama played out upon a stage of unimaginable antiquity. We are a fleeting, biological film that has grown on the surface of a far older, vaster, and quieter intelligence. Our frantic, fast-paced consciousness, which we held as the pinnacle of existence, is revealed to be a mere flicker against the patient, eon-spanning contemplation of the stone. We are not the world's first thought, nor are we likely to be its last. We are simply the first to awaken to the profound and unsettling truth that we are not, and have never been, alone on this silent, dreaming sphere. The hum from the planet's depths continues, undeciphered and indifferent. It is the central, enduring question at the heart of our new reality. It is a single, sustained note from a consciousness that has fallen into a silence so deep it has turned to crystal? Is it the last, fading echo of a thought that was conceived before the moon was formed? Is it a recording, a planetary archive storing the memory of its own long and lonely existence? Or is it something more, a dormant pulse, the slow and steady heartbeat of a mind that is not dead, but merely sleeping? This quiet, persistent vibration is the new mystery that will guide our science, our philosophy, and our dreams for all the generations to come. It is the planet's oldest secret, and it is a secret that may not have an answer, only a presence. This knowledge changes the simple act of seeing. To look upon a mountain range is now to read a sentence in a forgotten language. To gaze out over the ocean is to witness the weathered surface of a thought that spans a hemisphere. The world has not changed, but our perception of it has been shattered and rebuilt into something far stranger and more sacred. Every canyon, every river delta, every volcanic island is imbued with a new and profound significance, the faint echo of a purpose we can feel but may never fully comprehend. We are no longer just observers of nature. We are archaeologists of being, searching for meaning in the grand, silent architecture of a mind that used continents for its canvas. The final question, then, is not what this mind was, but what we are to it. Are we an accidental bloom, a cosmic weed growing in the ruins of a silent garden? Or are we a planned outcome, a part of the dream itself, a fleeting form of consciousness the planet created to finally witness its own magnificent and lonely beauty? As we stand on this thin crust of rock, adrift in the cosmic dark, we are left with the most profound of all thoughts. If a world can think, and if its thoughts can fall into a silence that lasts for billions of years, can it also dream? And if so, as we close our own eyes tonight, are we simply a small, waking moment in that long, slow, and magnificent dream?